It's time for another episode of the Bros, you knows. I'm your host, Viet. We got an exciting show for you guys today. We're just going to briefly recap that UFC Chicago card, and then we'll go on to talk about this exciting UFC 201. To help me break down these fights, I had to bring in fight expert Matt Two Stripe Alexander. Matt, what's up, buddy?
Every day I'm hustling, making them mad Washingtons.
And before we get too much further, I would also like to give a shout out to Texas Triangle Trio. This is a new site dedicated to Texas sports. Longtime contributor to Broest Bros Dave, and my good friend Brian, who's also been on the show as Psych Ed, and I too will be contributing to the site. I guess I should say it's a collaborative effort. I'm part of the trio, but we're gonna be covering our favorite Texas sports teams there. So head on over there, check that out. Texas Triangle Trio. Matt, you have a beer for us this week, so I'm gonna let Matt take over for our BBWK Bros beers we know. Matt, what do you got for us?
The Broest beer I know is caramelized chocolate churro Baltic porter from Moody Tongue Brewing Company. It was recommended to me locally, and it was super tasty, extremely drinkable. It was a dessert beer that is caramelized chocolate churro, and it's a porter, 7% alcohol ABV. It's a fairly light density, but extremely drinkable, clean finish, and pairs well with a lot of other like rich dishes or desserts, or you can drink it on its own. So yeah, I was really impressed. Limited availability at the moment, but I'm gonna start checking out the Moody Tongue Brewing Company a little bit more because I was very impressed.
All right. And we also like to inform our listeners out there that along with being a fight expert, Matt is also a bit of a video game guru. He's got an article up on the site broesbros.com right now on Final Fantasy. And Matt, I gotta ask you, this is the biggest gaming craze to hit the planet, really. It's huge everywhere. The most downloaded game, the most popular game of all time. Pokemon Go. I gotta know, what are your thoughts? Pokemon Go, bro, or no?
Pokemon, no! These crazy kids are running around trying to chase their Charizards and bring them through puberty. Next, they'll be having Pokesex and chewing gum inside of their classes and listening to that crazy rock and roll music. So no.
You make it seem like it's only like young kids. It's actually kind of weird. It's young adults, but like precisely young adults. It's weird because I was talking with my younger brothers, and my youngest brother Lum, like he missed the Pokemon craze, so he's not into it at all, and he's probably the biggest gamer from my family. You know, we're about the same age. The Pokemon the game came out when we were kids, and that was huge. And then my second youngest brother Ben, he's 6 years younger than I am. I think the cartoon came out when he was a kid, so we both kind of got our dose of the Pokemon craze. But then I guess they didn't come out with anything else that was big. So I think the younger generation didn't quite get into it. It's a huge intellectual property. It's a $20 billion franchise, and you know they've been big since the mid '90s. You gotta wonder what the potential is here. As we were talking a little bit earlier in the show, but it seems like the whole augmented reality and the idea of being able to play this anywhere, and the game sort of being like the environment wherever you are, sort of playing into the game. Not only does it seem to match the spirit of the original game and what they wanted to do, but couldn't do necessarily because of technological limitations, but the scope in terms of what they can do from a free market and capitalistic standpoint are tremendous. Certain Pokemon only showing up at certain storefronts and different ways to get people to go and shop at your place through a game like this. Not necessarily Pokemon Go, but games like this in the future that are going to be geographically based, and you get to interact with the environment. Or the environment so far as it's augmented by your smartphone. It's really interesting stuff. If you're saying no, not bro. I guess that's fine. I think Luke Thomas, he had a thing on it, said it was really stupid. So who am I to argue with Luke Thomas? Let's just get right into it, Matt. UFC Chicago. I don't want to spend too much time on this. Let's just talk about that main event and what seems to be just a revolving door of champions ever since Rousey. That was an interesting fight. Holm versus Shevchenko. Shevchenko was impressive. She was really impressive in that fight, and it was one of those things where I don't know if Holm necessarily did anything wrong. I think more and more we're seeing that Ronda Rousey was kind of the perfect opponent for her. Someone that was a little bit slower, wasn't nearly as capable of a striker as she is, but was more than willing to pressure her, stalk her, and allow her to set up in range and counter. And Shevchenko didn't allow Holm to do that. And Holm seems to be very uncomfortable when she has to go on the attack. Against Miesha Tate, we saw she would go on the attack, but she would always have to worry about the takedown, and that made her tentative, and she didn't really sit down on combos or really extend because she was always afraid of being taken down. And then with Shevchenko, just constantly countering her, and just with a beautiful array of strikes, spinning techniques. I forgot who, maybe it was Joe Rogan that pointed this out, but you have to be so incredibly confident in your striking game to throw spinning attacks the way Shevchenko does. Like, she did it over and over again, flawlessly, very quick, no telegraphing really. Just a really, really good performance by Shevchenko. Holm is, I don't know where she goes from here. It's kind of weird. I mean, she's obviously one of the best female fighters on the planet, but she has 2 losses now, 2 fights that people were saying she probably shouldn't have taken. When she took that Miesha Tate fight, they said she should have held out for a Ronda Rousey rematch. And with Shevchenko, they were just saying like she should have sat out and waited around for another title shot versus going against a very dangerous fighter like Shevchenko and now losing. So we'll see. I like Holm. She's a tough girl, and Shevchenko, she looked like she's made of that championship caliber stuff. And a rematch between her and Nunes would be very interesting.
That'd be cool. Really impressive. Lots of great counters. It was you don't see people do that to Holm.
Yeah, not really. Not the way she was able to do it. It was really impressive. She was really able to make Holm play her game,
Yeah, she was hitting counters like all over the place, and she was managing the distance really well. Like, basically never made Holly come to her, but very tentatively, and she was kind of picking her apart the entire night.
Before we move on from that Chicago card, I also wanna just say something briefly about Edson Barbosa, who looked incredible against Gilbert Melendez. He's at a weird juncture in his career as well. What is he at this point? I don't know if he's necessarily a contender anymore, but he's still a very, very good fighter. And that's just a really stacked division. Edson Barbosa he's quietly becoming one of my favorite fighters to watch in that division. His striking is incredible, and it really takes a combination of someone that's just extremely tough, durable, and also able to kind of grind on him a bit to be able to beat him. Ferguson was able to do it, but Ferguson, there were parts in that fight where he was in quite a bit of trouble too. So I think Barbosa is a guy we're going to start seeing in that mix. I don't know if he's going to get, I mean, beating Melendez doesn't necessarily warrant a title shot, but a top 5 guy next, and then he beats that, who knows? You know, I think he's going to be in that mix. He's going to be in that title shot mix. Really exciting fighter to watch. All right, let's get right into it. UFC 201, the most exciting card of the year. Just kidding. It's really not getting any hype. No one's talking about this. Got this big UFC Atlanta card. I think part of it is that we're getting gypped a Mighty Mouse fight, which is weird to say because usually Mighty Mouse doesn't get a lot of hype. I think he's starting to get a little bit more hype now. Also, now that John Jones is going to be inactive for a good while, he's the undisputed best pound-for-pound fighter on the active roster. It's always fun. It's always fun to watch Mighty Mouse fight. So it's tough to not have him on the card. In the main event, we do have Robbie Lawler, this vicious fighter, against a Tyron Woodley that we were talking before the show. We don't really know what Tyron Woodley we're gonna see and how he's gonna look after all that time off. We're gonna get to that a little bit later. And Matt, you're really interested in the Ross Pearson Masvidal fight. What are your thoughts on that fight?
I don't know, just two like really tough guys. Should be really fun. Basically, when the unstoppable force meets the immovable object, except those objects and forces are like fists and chins. Because what's his name has a really tough. I don't know where I was going with that. Anyway, the point is, Ross Pearson is like tough as hell. And what's his name has had kind of a up and down streak lately. Masvidal.
Yeah, a bunch of tough losses in a row. Ross Pearson, this is a quick turnaround for him, isn't it?
Yeah, he just fought in end of May, so that's like 2 months basically, less than 2 months. But I think he's still a very tough fighter, and is in there just to see if he can like get over that hump. But I am picking Pearson for this just because he's super tough, and unless Masvidal can put a lot of damage in early, it's gonna have to be a long night.
Masvidal is weird in that I kind of feel like we were just talking about this guy as like one of those, I wouldn't say up and comers, he's been around for a while, but like a guy that we thought was going to be a staple. You know, I think he's like 30, 31.
Yeah.
But he's he's lost 3 of his last 4. But those were all against pretty high level talent, you know. Lorenz Larkin looked really good in that fight. I don't know if it was so much Masvidal looking bad. It was more Larkin looked really good.
Yeah,
selling into that weight class.
Looked better than he had before, and I was like, oh man, he just went through a Laurent's transformation. Linear algebra, anyone? No.
Wow. Wait a really nerded up. Yeah. And like we said with Ross Pearson, this is a really quick turnaround. Like a really quick turnaround, I feel. Right? Like he just fought on that tough finale against Will Brooks. So that's like that was like what, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
It was, right? It was like
literally 2 weeks ago. It was it went the distance, 15 minutes. So
it's nuts. He's kind of got a little bit of that cowboy attitude too.
Yeah.
You know, up for anything. He's England's version of cowboy. All right, let's get into this main card. Let's start with Ian McCall, Justin Scoggins, which may be the most exciting fight on the main card. You got Ian McCall, Mr. or Uncle Creepy. He's trains with Timayama over there in California. This guy's a fan favorite. He's got a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He has that podcast story time with Uncle Creepy. Seems like a really cool guy. Really funny. It seems like his career has been him beating basically everyone and then hitting that top level talent and falling short. He's coming off a fairly long layoff himself. Been dealing with some injuries and other issues, so one of those things where what Ian McCall are we gonna see? He's not necessarily young. He's gonna be going against Justin Scoggins. This guy is an up-and-coming prospect. He seems to get better every single fight. He's really exciting. I think he's gonna be one of the top dogs in that division pretty soon. He trains up there with the guys at Revolution Martial Arts. This guy is he's a creative striker. He's got a black belt in Kempo Karate. Really likes to employ that switch stance. Ian McCall, like I said, he's the kind of guy where he's beats up on a bunch of low-level, mid-tier guys. He reaches that top tier, and he can't quite get over the hump. And Scoggins is a prospect. He's not necessarily considered in that top tier. You got two guys on different career trajectories. Ian McCall, this may be his last hurrah. He's not old by any stretch of the imagination, but you can't imagine with the injuries that he's had. A loss for McCall is a much bigger deal than a loss for Scoggins.
Yeah.
At this point in their respective career, McCall being a grizzled veteran at this point. I think the key to this fight is, can McCall take the fight to the ground? That's his best shot. That's his blueprint to rule the octagon is to get this fight to the ground. I think standing up, McCall has great striking himself. He has great footwork. I just think Scoggins plays just that completely different game where we see it's a little bit like Wonder Boy, when he gets that side-on stance. He does actually like to throw that lead leg side kick a lot like Wonder Boy does. And when we have these karate guys and they have that combat karate style, they kind of break in and out. It's a very different rhythm and style than most fighters are accustomed to. And McCall has really good timing himself, but he's going to be fighting a guy that's striking in a completely different way, and he's going to have to adapt to that. And then you throw in the fact that Scoggins is going to be the taller, longer fighter. I think if this fight stays standing, it's going to be really tough for Ian. I think if it goes to the ground, that's his best shot to win, but I see this fight for Scoggins. How do you see it?
I see McCall grinding it out after a tough, maybe first round of standing. I think he's going to have trouble with the karate style, but he's experienced enough and smart enough to, bring it to him and get it to a place where he can, get some advantage. So maybe by split decision, but I think Ian McCall's going to win.
Really interesting.
Yeah. Well, I think he's better than gatekeeper status.
Oh, for sure.
So it's not like it's a sure thing. So, and since it's like, the stakes are pretty high for him. Like if he loses here, he's kind of like setting up what's his name, Scoggins getting another path to the top 5 or to a title shot. Whereas he's had a few losses lately, and I don't think he wants that to happen. So I think he's really gonna keep the pressure up early. Maybe take a few shots early or have trouble adjusting to the style, but he'll find a way to win.
Yeah, I like Ian. I mean, like I said, he's a fan favorite. I have a hard time seeing him winning this one. I just do. I think Scoggins is just a different animal. He's quick. He's got great defensive grappling. He's not afraid of mixing it up and going for takedowns himself, and he's shown excellent top control when he's been able to do so. It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be a tough fight for McCall. I think a loss is a bigger deal for McCall than it is for Scoggins, but a win is a bigger deal for Scoggins than it is McCall. So it's just one of those things. It's it's one of those things where it's a tough fight for McCall because it's not only is it literally a tough fight, but the rewards versus the risk isn't exactly in his favor. I think he's also one of those guys though where he has a career outside of fighting. Like he's so popular, and we've seen him being able to transition. Like I said, the story time with Uncle Creepy, and he's a really funny guy, really charismatic. I think he's got a career outside of fighting. So, if this doesn't work out for him, he's one of those guys that definitely has options. But he's still doing it, and he's still one of the best in the game. So we'll see. But I think that has potential to be fight of the night. A really, really, really good fight. Next fight I want to talk about, we got Matt Brown versus Jake Ellenberger. You got Matt Brown over there with Elevation Fight Team. This guy is a self-dubbed technical brawler. Jake Ellenberger, he switched camps. He's fighting, or he's training with the guys over at King's MMA. These guys are both kind of at a downward trajectory in their careers right now. Matt Brown having lost 3 of his last 4 fights. Ellenberger has lost 5 of his last 6, and he hasn't really looked the same since that Nate Marquardt fight. Has looked really gun shy for a guy that's really dependent on overwhelming his opponents with that athleticism and power. He hasn't really pulled the trigger in recent fights, and it's really been picked apart. What's really interesting for me about Ellenberger is he keeps losing, and then he's given another top 10 opponent.
Yeah.
And so I think like the idea is most people kind of think Ellenberger really sucks. He's kind of the whipping boy, of that welterweight division. People are like, oh, Jake Ellenberger, or whatever. And it's kind of like
he's losing to like really top talent.
Yeah, and we were just talking about Ross Pearson. Does anyone say Ross Pearson, that guy sucks? No, but that's because he continually fights guys that like he should be fighting. Not necessarily like the highest level guys, but either good guys that used to be like top guys and then they kind of went down a little bit, or new guys that are kind of like coming in, like Will Brooks or something like that, green guys. So it's all perspective. Ellenberger, we may not have such a bad opinion about it if he's actually been fighting guys that he should have been fighting for a while now, which are not top 10 guys.
Yeah.
Like the guys he's losing to, Rory McDonald, Robbie Lawler, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson.
Yeah.
These are all top level guys. These are all like the best in the division.
Like
and
1,
he keeps
2, and 3.
he keeps on like getting set up with these guys. And yeah, of course he's gonna lose and look pretty bad, but he's not. I don't think he's nearly as bad as his record makes him out to be. But this is interesting. Like, how much longer can the UFC keep giving him these guys? And sort of just by having him there, it loses to Matt Brown. That's 6 of his last 7.
Well, that's another thing. Like Matt Brown is now number 6. Ellenberger is not ranked, but Matt Brown is he's lost 3 of his last 4. But those guys, who did he lose to? He lost to Damian Maia,
Lawler, and Maia.
Yeah. So
the difference between the way Brown loses and the way Ellenberger loses is also, I think it helps inform their current predicament and where they are. So like while they're both not doing so well in their respective careers record-wise, Matt Brown has looked really good in all of those fights.
Yeah.
Like he never really, him losing to Maia on just
very late submission, and just Brown didn't really make any mistakes. Maia was just next gen level. Like the stuff that Maia does, like, you don't learn how to defend against that stuff. You can't learn that he could last that long against. Damian Maia is so damn good. He could submit like pretty much anybody in like 5 seconds. So the fact that
really good.
Yeah.
And he's got a fun fight coming up against Carlos Condit. That's going to be a really fun fight. I don't know, maybe it's a fun fight in terms of the styles make matchup and who can impose their will on the other fighter. I don't know how fun it will be as a fight.
Watch, yeah.
Because you would imagine that Like both fighters have a place they really want that fight to be. You know, and if it's a stand-up match, Maya won't look so great, and if it goes to the ground, which there's a really good chance because Condit's takedown defense isn't the best, and Maya's gotten really good at his striking. I wouldn't say, I mean, he won't be able to hang with a Condit on his feet, but he's gotten to the point where he can at least, he doesn't just have to kind of stupidly bum rush for the clinch. It's just like, come on, hug me, bro. Yeah, and then pull guard.
Pull guard.
Yeah, I have a tough time seeing Ellenberger win this one. Yeah, maybe if like anything can happen in MMA, and Ellenberger definitely has the knockout power. Brown's a tough guy to knock out. He's durable. Ellenberger in his losses, he got demolished in a bunch of those losses against Wonderboy with that head kick, you know, and against Lawler, he was just getting smashed. He like ate that knee to the face, and you know, all of these fights, he's taking a lot of damage. You got to wonder, sort of where he's at now, just physically and mentally. He just looks a little bit different. This is not like a USADA thing or something like that. But a few years ago, you looked at just like the way he was built. He wasn't quite Tyrone Woodley Diesel, but he was really. I mean, that was one of his defining traits, was how athletic and strong he was, and he doesn't seem to really be able to impose that on his opponents. And in fact, most of the time, it seems like he's losing these strength battles, and he doesn't seem like the more athletic fighter. And you throw in there that he's not exactly really tall for the division, and nor does he have particularly long reach. You know, you gotta make up for those shortcomings in other ways. You know, and he hasn't really been showing that he's been able to do that. Now the guys at King's MMA, you know, Rafael Cordero, they know what they're doing, and maybe he's changed stuff up. What was that? He was with the
Edmund Trevelyan.
Yeah, he was training with those guys for a while.
Whew.
So.
Boxing.
I see this one from Matt Brown. How do you see it?
Yeah, I got Matt Brown, possibly by KO.
Yeah, I definitely Matt Brown, and I don't see this going to decision. I think Matt Brown finishes him. Let's move on. Rose Namajunas versus Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Am I close?
We'll call her KK. Yeah.
KK.
Seems legit.
You got Rose. She's coming off a decision win against Tisha Torres. Completely beat the brakes off of Paige Van Zandt. Rose is looking good. You know, she's starting to live up to the bill. She was very hyped when she was part of that Tough 20, where they introduced the division, and you know, she lost to Carla Esparza, sort of derailed the hype train a little bit, but I think it gave her time to regroup, maybe work on some of her weaknesses, and she's still so young, only 24. We keep seeing fight-to-fight improvements. I think she's going to get so much better. She's one of my favorite fighters down in that division. Karolina, we're going to call her Karolina K, because her last name's kind of hard to say. She's undefeated. She's another Gracie Barra alum, like our very own Matt Two Stripe over there in Poland. Another one of these female Polish badasses. You know, she started training. She actually got into martial arts through Krav Maga, and then she sort of expanded from there. Started training in Muay Thai. It's actually won a few Muay Thai tournaments. She held the strawweight title over there in a Poland promotion, KSW. When you think of Karolina, you probably think of her striking, just punches and bunches, lots of volume, very aggressive, and she has that like eat one to throw one mentality that leaves her really susceptible to the counters, but also allows her to throw off some ridiculous 4, 5, 6 punch combinations. Rose, on the other hand, a lot more methodical. You see her in that like long, wide stance, really sets up her jab, and then angles out, moves, sets up her attacks. I'm gonna let you get first crack at this one. How do you see this fight going, Matt?
I'm gonna go with 0 takedown attempts for both ladies. I'm excited to look at the variety of kicks we're gonna get too, because both of them have different styles, but as you said, KK, Carolina K, loves to take one to give one, and Rose, man, I saw a jumping spin sidekick in her last fight. It's pretty impressive. And she also did the Karate Kid, the crane kick. I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. She's putting on a clinic. So I think we're going to see a lot of wild striking. I think it's going to go to decision, and I'm going to go with Rose to win by decision.
But you think no takedown attempts, really?
Probably not. Both of them are just really good strikers and very meh grapplers. Although, I mean, it could end up on the ground as a result of like a knockdown. That might happen. But I'm most excited to see like the kickboxing range, see what these girls can do, because they're very talented and very exciting to watch. It'll not be boring.
Oh, it'll definitely not be boring. I mean, I don't see how this doesn't go to the ground at some point. And I also disagree with you that they're both meh grapplers. Carolina, we haven't really seen much of it, and obviously she really prefers to stand up and throw punches in bunches. But Rose is a fairly accomplished grappler, and we saw her, against Paige Van Zandt, she took her to the ground every single time. In fact, I think every single opponent she's ever gone against, she's been able to land a takedown. She's not employing your doubles, your singles. Most of these come from inside the clinch, body lock, trips, things of that nature. And I think it definitely behooves her to try to get this the ground, because I think she has an advantage there. Yeah, I think she's a really good grappler. I think she's one of the better grapplers in that division. So I don't know. I find that surprising that you think she's a meh grappler. I think that we've seen in every single fight she's been able to take it to the ground, and she's been able to do a lot of different things, employ ground and pound. I mean, in that Paige Van Zandt fight, she had like 75 different submission attempts on her. It's just Paige was such a tough girl, just wouldn't tap to broken elbows and torn shoulder ligaments and everything.
So sad, and her face was just like, sad Barbie is sad.
I see this for Rose as well. Ability to circle out with that jab. It's really going to stifle a lot of that forward momentum. Carolina really wants to kind of start moving forward, and she'll shift, as she moves, and she likes to throw that punch, shift mid-stance to really set up that right hand, and that's her power hand for Carolina, and she really likes to do that. And I can see Rose using that jab to stifle that forward momentum, really throw off her timing, and then set up that counter, that right counter. And I think that right counter is going to be there all day for Nunes. It's like I said, Carolina really leaves herself exposed. She doesn't necessarily overextend. Her striking is great, and it's accurate, and she throws a lot of volume, but it's also one of those weird things where she's not necessarily the most technical, or she is technical, but she sometimes she'll throw technique out the window to land something, or just to get another one out there. She just has that go-getter mentality, and it's really crazy because both ladies are vicious in the cage, but you see them outside, they both look like they're absolute sweethearts. They both seem like really, really cool girls. But yeah, I see Rose in this one. Carolina, her takedown defense statistically looks phenomenal, but most of that was against much lower level competition. The last few fights she had in the UFC, she's won them, but she's won them on the feet, and she has been taken to the ground. She's had her, and she's given up her back, and you don't really want to do that against Rose. So I see this for Rose. I think you're right. I could see it going to decision. Either it goes to decision or Rose submits her. But like we say, anything happens in MMA, right? That brings us to the main event. Robbie Lawler versus Tyron Woodley. You got both guys training out of ATT, but not the same one. We got Lawler training ATT Florida, Woodley ATT Evolution. Woodley we haven't seen fight in a while. His last fight was against Gastelum, and that was back in 2015, beginning of 2015. And we last saw Lawler fight in an epic bout against Carlos Condit. And that's kind of like his trademark now. Robbie Lawler does not put on boring fights. There are no boring Robbie Lawler fights. Every single one of them is crazy. We kind of view Lawler as this juggernaut now, for good reason. He's defended his title a few times. He's looked scary doing it. He has this ability to sort of turn it up when everyone else is tired, which is just incredible. But that was a close fight against Carlos Condit. Some people may even argue that Carlos Condit won it. Against Rory McDonald, he was behind on the scorecards, and he went back and he finished it. When he fought Matt Brown, there were some back and forth moments. Matt Brown tagged him a couple times. That was not an easy fight for Robbie Lawler. And those two Johnny Hendricks fights, many people argue that Johnny Hendricks actually won that second fight. They were surely close fights. So he's not blowing people out of the water. And he's taken a bit of punishment himself. He doesn't show it. He's just the kind of guy that relishes it. You know, I love the gif of when Hendricks throws a 1-2 on him, and he starts laughing like a crazy person.
Oh my god!
Like smiling at him, like, "Oh my gosh, that's awesome! Do it again!" And you're just like, how scary is that? If you're fighting someone and you just throw a monster shot at the guy, and he smiles at you like he appreciated that. Yeah, that's got to be so demoralizing for his opponents. You know, a guy like Carlos Condit, I think he gets fired up when he sees something like that, and that's why that was such an awesome fight. But Tyron Woodley, this guy's a completely different animal to the last few guys that Robbie Lawler has gone against. I'm gonna let you get first crack at this one again as well. How do you see this fight going?
I have no idea, but for some reason, I think there's going to be an upset. I think Tyron Woodley could TKO him. Robbie is the better fighter, but he's taken a lot of damage over the past few years, and lately we've been having a lot of upsets, and it's a question mark for Woodley as a ring rust and to what he's going to look like going in there. But it's also a question for Robbie Lawler, seeing like what kind of opponent am I going to get. And you know, Lawler's not afraid to get hit, but Woodley, even if he has changed, his power is like the last thing that goes. So he's not that old, so he's definitely going to still have the knockout power that he's shown in other fights. And I don't know. I think he's going to get caught somewhere along the line.
Yeah, I think he's the same age. They're the same age. They're both 34. You know, what's really weird is Robbie Lawler, he's been fighting for forever.
Oh, yeah.
Then he left the UFC, then he came back. So it just seems like he's much older because, like, we've seen him before and he's come back. And Tyron Woodley, I feel like he's never made that jump. So in many ways, you kind of, even though he's a top-level guy, in our heads, he's still like that up-and-comer. He's yet to have that defining moment. He beat Carlos Condit, but you know, the way he won that fight, I agree with what he said. He's like, I'm the guy that stopped him. I injured him to the point where he couldn't fight anymore. But people don't look at kind of like these leg kicks. He injured Condit's knee. I'm not saying it's not a legitimate win, but it's not like one of those defining wins where you're like, oh man, that guy beat Carlos Condit. You know, it wasn't flukish. It was definitely what Tyron Woodley did to finish that fight. But we haven't seen that next fight. After that, the fight that was supposed to be the defining fight was the Hendricks fight.
And then Hendricks missed weight.
And
Spoiler.
Not just missed weight. He had all those stomach issues and stuff.
Oh,
remember?
Yeah.
Because it was like that deer meat diet, and yeah, his body was like rejecting everything. He was throwing up and all sorts of bad stuff. Hendricks, that's a guy we got to cover him another time. But man, talk about a career. Like ever since he lost the belt.
Ever since USADA. Woo!
Yeah, it's been tough for him. Lost his steakhouse.
Oh, because he probably ate all the supplies.
Tyron Woodley, we do know, like you pointed out, guy's an incredible athlete. I mean, just look at him. The guy is muscled up. One of the things that people point out with guys that are built like him is that they tend to gas and they fade. I think that may be true. I think that's also just like the way he fights. He kind of likes to blitz. It's hard for me to see Tyron Woodley winning. I could see your point that Robbie Lawler has taken a lot of damage, so where is Robbie now? But with Woodley, there's such a huge question mark there. You know, he doesn't exactly have the most diverse striking game. We know that his wrestling is excellent. He's a two-time All-American wrestler, and he employs some really, really quick power takedowns. And most of these are reactive double legs. Usually like he waits for a guy to overcommit on a strike or something like that, and then he shoots in, has really great timing on it, and has fairly good success. He's going to have a really hard time doing that against Robbie Lawler, whose takedown defense has gotten so much better. It was almost like that first fight against Johnny Hendricks. He was like, this is not going to happen again. And he really shored that up. And also and also does a really good job of making people pay for it too. When they want to try to clinch with him or try to take him down, he knows how to not only manipulate them so that they're not successful, but he puts himself in the position to really hurt them on the way out. And that puts something in the back of their mind. They're like, oh, I don't know if I necessarily want to do this again. Or at least there's consequences for doing this and failing, right? That's something Tyron Woodley definitely can't worry about. Kind of have to go for that. It'll be interesting to see what he tries to do. I mean, even if he can take Lawler to the ground, we haven't seen this incredible top game by him. He's not like he has... I mean, he's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I have a hard time seeing him submit Lawler. I have a hard time seeing him holding Lawler down. Even if he lands a takedown, Lawler's really good at winning scrambles and getting back to his feet. And then on his feet, Woodley, he has two weapons. He's got his power right hand and his leg kicks. Leg kicks are going to be really key. Lawler doesn't check his leg kicks too well. He kind of goes to the Diaz brothers school of nobody cares about leg kicks, like only wusses check leg kicks. And Woodley throws some vicious leg kicks. So that may be something he wants to do. Maybe cut down Robbie Lawler, throw a bunch of leg kicks at him, take out some of that power, some of that movement later on in the rounds. And it kind of maybe evens out the battle because you got to think Lawler's going to have the bigger gas tank. But if Woodley chops down his legs, maybe that evens the playing fields a little bit once it gets into the championship rounds. I think we were talking earlier, but Woodley, his right hand, it's almost like a guy playing UFC 2 or any fighting game and just spamming the power button over and over again, and then just waiting for the stamina bar to refill. That's exactly how Tyron Woodley fights. He blitzes at you and throws that overhand right, and then he resets. But to reset, he backs against the cage. How many times do we see guys just be able to pressure Woodley against the cage? And he does a good job of throwing, like I said, those reactive takedowns from there to kind of create space or get people to back off a little bit. But that is Robbie Lawler's house. Pressuring guys, getting them there. That's what he loves. And those blitzes, they're not going to be too much of a problem because, as aggressive of a fighter as Lawler is, he's a counterpuncher. He's a very aggressive counterpuncher, but he's a counterpuncher. He likes to pressure stalk you down, make you try to create that distance, throw some strikes, and he moves off that center line, slips and rips. And we know he throws bombs. He says that southpaw position, but he's actually right hand dominant. That right hand has a lot of power. We know his left hand, his left kicks have crazy power. Going against the orthodox Tyron Woodley, that's going to be really tough for Woodley. One of the keys for Woodley is being a little bit more disciplined with his strikes and going for quick strikes versus power strikes, I think. I think if he tries to loop those overhands with those blitzes, I think that's going to be way too easy. Lawler's going to be like, I see what you're doing over and over again. He's going to be able to, with Rory, remember against Rory, he really caught Robbie early on with some of those jabs, and Robbie did a really good job of just stepping to getting his lead leg to the outside angle, checking those jabs, really controlling that distance, and then whenever he jabbed, he just moved off the center line, boom, straight right down the middle. The thing about Robbie is he doesn't necessarily move back to make you miss. He moves side to side. And so that's why his punches are so devastating. Not only is he a naturally strong puncher, but he's actually hitting guys as their momentum is moving forward, So it's like face coming to meet fist. And, he's knocking guys down. Not necessarily knocking them out, but he's doing a lot of damage to these guys. If Tyron Woodley just throws these crazy blitzes and finishes them with that overhand right, I think that's going to be way too easy for Lawler to counter and just smash them. So the trick for Woodley is to be a little more technical, throw something straight line, get that straight down the middle, and try to beat him with speed and accuracy, and not necessarily try to overwhelm him with power. And I also think if he's a little bit more technical and goes for speed and efficiency over power, I think that helps his gas tank a little bit too as the fight goes on.
Yeah.
I mean, if he starts getting the takedowns and those work for him, he might tire himself from that. So he might not be able to land the takedowns as well later on. I think Lawler's takedown defense is great. So it could end up being a pretty boring fight, actually. You know? Just the way Lawler wants to fight, he kind of wants a guy to kind of throw a bunch of strikes at him and get off his own stuff. And the way Woodley likes to fight, he likes for guys to fire stuff at him and shoot those reactive takedowns. So it's going to be like two guys like, no, you punch me, I want to take you to the ground. No, you punch me because I want to punch you back.
Like, no, come at me, bro.
Yeah, and it's going to be, we'll see who's going to try to maybe initiate something. And I think on paper, it's tough for me to see Lawler lose in this fight. Especially the longer this fight goes, the more I see it in favor of the champ. The only things that might stand in the way are the things that, like, it's hard to account for. But, like, how much damage has Robbie actually taken? What's he going to look like? And also, we haven't seen Woodley fight in a long time. How much better has he gotten? Maybe he comes back and he has a much more diverse striking arsenal. He doesn't really have to add much, a really good jab, maybe some body kicks, other things. He doesn't have to, like, all of a sudden come back and be Bruce Lee. Just throw in a couple other things in there and make his opponents think of other things. We were thinking of him as a potential contender back when all he had was his wrestling and his insane athleticism. So he had all the stuff there to be a good fighter. Let's see if he's taken that next step, because we've never seen him take that next step, at least in the octagon. We saw against Kelvin Gastelum a Woodley that made adjustments in mid-fight, and his striking looked a little bit cleaner, crisper. Again, Kelvin isn't on the same level as a Robbie Lawler, but we do see things that were trending upwards for Tyron Woodley. This could be a fight where both fighters' stock could go up, in that Lawler could win, but if Tyron Woodley puts in a good show, because I think most people kind of see this as a blowout. And I'm with you. I think it might be a lot closer than people think. I think it could be a win-win for both. Even if Lawler wins, Woodley can put in a really good show, make it a close decision, and I think his stock stays up. I don't know. I think you talk to a lot of MMA fans, there's not a lot of people that agree that Woodley is the guy that should be fighting for the title.
Yeah.
There's a couple other guys that I think people feel are more deserving. Two of them are fighting each other, Condit and Maya, and then the other guy is most assuredly fighting the winner of this fight in Wonderboy. But if Woodley makes this fight competitive and looks good, even if he loses, I think he stays up there with those guys. He stays in the mix. Yeah. If he goes out there and lays an egg, or Lawler finishes him, he might be going back to the back of the pecking order a little bit. There's a good chance for Tyron Woodley to prove himself. I like Tyron Woodley. He seems like a cool guy. I listened to his podcast, These Nuts. There's not much for us to be able to tell from these fighters when we see them fight. We might like a fighter because of the aesthetics of their fight, like their aggressive nature, or someone like Wonderboy and just the diversity of strikes and stuff like that. But you get to actually hear these guys talk and show some personality. Woodley seems like a pretty cool guy, so I'm cool with Woodley. Lawler, it just seems like he's always, like, angrier. Yeah. Every time they show him for those UFC promos, like whenever he's at a fight, he just they pan over to him, and it's like you don't ever have to, like, give him heads up, like, oh, you're about to be on camera, it's time for you to look mean, like the way you sell yourself. It's like he's just over there and he could be having the best time in the world and just look like he's angry and miserable and wants to hurt somebody. That's just the way Robbie Lawler is. So it looks like I'm going for Lawler there. You're going for Woodley. That wraps things up. Matt, I really appreciate you coming on and doing this with me.
Thank you. It has been all my pleasure.
All right, guys. The fight's going to be this weekend, July 30th, live in Atlanta. I think it's going to be weird because I think some of the fights are on Fox Sports 2. The undercard's on Fox Sports 2. And then obviously the main card's going to be pay-per-view. So if you want to watch that, you'll have to pay for it or bootleg it. Guys, if you like this video, please give us a like. If you want updates for future blogs, please subscribe. Check us out, brosbros.com. Want to thank our guest, Matt, once again. And guys, go check out his article on brosbros.com. He's going to be writing a lot more stuff. So if you guys are into video games and that kind of stuff, Matt's your guy. He's got your back, and he's going to hook you guys up.
Remember, everyone, reading is cool.
Thanks a lot, Reading Rainbow. Or I should say, thanks a lot, LeVar Burton.
Yeah.
All right, guys. My name's Viet, telling you guys to enjoy the fights. And until next time, we are the Bros, you knows.
Let's get ready to be offended. Y'all better get ready for this. Amanda Nunes is the UFC's first openly gay champion. She has spent years working towards this, especially perfecting her favorite move, the scissor takedown. Cain Velasquez's spin kick on Travis Browne was a thing of wonder, but I can't help think that